What's up, folks? My name is Coach Denise, and I am the owner and principal consultant of Never Stop Growing Coaching and Consulting. I am also the host of the Leadership Chronicles. The Leadership Chronicles was designed to be an inclusive space for leaders of all levels and multiple backgrounds to come together and just share and learn from one another. No one is an expert over the other, and yet we are all experts in our own respective lanes. And so the Leadership Chronicles is where we come together just to share some tips to help build us up and help us strengthen our capacity to be stronger leaders in our fields. All right. This is the second episode of the Leadership Chronicles. We are running every other Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. And so thank you all for tuning in to episode 2. My hope as we continue to go on, right? I don't want to be here by myself doing all of them. So my hope is to bring on guests. So if you are interested, I invite you to join my mailing list, thekeynsg.com. So the key NancySamGolden.com. When you head to my website, you're going to see an option to join the mailing list. Joining the mailing list will give you access to things that I have coming up. And so when I am looking for people to join and share their expertise, that's where I'm going to, okay? I'm going to be sending out blasts to the folks on the mailing list to invite you to speak on whatever topic or subject that I have coming up. Okay, here's the other thing, getting some housekeeping stuff out the way. If there is a particular subject that you want to talk about, please let me know. That's through the same channel. Join the mailing list. I only send out one mailer a month, so you will not be inundated with mailers. The only time you will receive something more than once a month from me is if I have an event that is coming close to the due date. You might receive 2, maximum 3 notifications from me for the month. Okay. That is also one of the easiest ways to stay connected to what we have going on. You can drop comments and such on these posts if you want. If you drop an email address wherever you're seeing this, or if you drop an email address in the chat, I will take it, store it, and add you to the mailing list. And if there's a specific question that you have and you reach out me via direct message on whatever platform you find me on, I respond in that way too. But the best way to get the most recent and accurate updates from NSG would be to join the mailing list. So get on that list. Okay, folks. So this is episode 2 of Listen Up Listen in and Speak Up. Okay, this is part 2. So in part 1, just to give you a little recap, some of the things that we focused on was tapping into the creativity of our team members in order to effectuate change. And so this is where I talked about really getting curious about their desires, their goals, not just as it relates to the work, but get a little deeper if you can. Get a little deeper and understand who they are, what their passions are, what their desires are. Because if they can see themselves in the work that they're doing day to day, you're going to yield much better results when it comes down to performance and outcomes, okay? Often what I share is for the human service profession, so that includes child welfare, social services, services for the unhoused, all these different human service aspects. I typically speak to this group of leaders, and yet the skills that are being discussed transcend those professions. And so if you hear something that works for you, please drop a line in the chat and let me know what it is. And also let me know what line of profession you're in, because I love to know just who's checking this out and who's interested. So last week, that's what we talked about. And if you're interested in seeing the full video, it is on my YouTube page, NSG Coaching on YouTube. To get into what I wanted to talk about this week is more of, after you've done the legwork of understanding your team members, after you've gone into talking more with them and understanding who they are and what their interests are on a deeper level, in order to um, get a deeper sense of awareness about the team members and increase their productivity, we want to now start transferring that into some actionable steps. And so today we're going to focus on goal setting and its impact on outcomes. And so I'm just going through my notes to make sure that I cover what it is that I intended to cover with you guys. I want to give y'all exactly what I set out to do, and I'll break down how this session is going to go. So first, we're going to start off with talking about developing plans that energize staff and meet organizational goals. The second part, we're going to go into developing skills that increase job satisfaction. And then the third part is going to be some Q&A. So I sent out a poll last week, or actually the week before last, I sent out a poll, and there were some responses back, and the responses were connected to this particular episode. And it was basically going into understanding more of what people wanted to see and discuss when it came down to communication. So the focus clearly of this first two-parter is on communication and building up stronger communication within your team members to effectuate change and to boost outcomes, right? So we'll go into the Q&A, and then I'll just share with you what we have coming up from NSG, and that will be the close of our session if there are no additional questions. So starting us off, developing plans that energize staff and meet organizational goals. So you've done the work, right? You've watched the first video, you've employed some of the suggestions from the first video, you have an increased awareness of your team members and the things that interest them. From there, the other part of what we talked about in the first session was now connecting the dots and asking them how they see those skills and those passions connecting to the work that they are tasked with doing. And so you've already done that, right? We're at phase 2. So you've already taken care of those first two things, what their motivations are, what their passions are, their hobbies, and how they see it connecting to the work. You really have unlocked this ability for them to think broadly and to think creatively about how other aspects of their life can be seen and show up and be used as a helpful supportive tool here. So now they've identified that, maybe verbally, they might have written it down for you, but now we have to package that into an action plan. And that is not always an easy thing to do. When we think about our team members, and one of the things that I found extremely helpful is being able to get my team members to start thinking outside of the box and seeing how the stuff that they love to do and they do so well can serve them in their task. And so I'm thinking about the days when I've been in child welfare almost 20 years. I'm thinking about the days when I was a supervisor over a therapeutic foster care unit. And there was this amazing artist that I had the pleasure and honor of supervising. And this was one of her first jobs out of college. And she just super talented in the art space. And so I employed some of the techniques, actually all the techniques that I talked about in the first session. And I got to know her a little bit more. Now, for me, let me tell y'all, because if y'all are thinking, I don't have the time to get to know people like that, baby, don't worry, because that was my mindset as well. And I'm going to share this with you all about time, because a lot of times we'll sit through stuff, we'll learn some things, it sounds all good, but then it's like, I don't have the time. I've come to learn and have it repeatedly proven over and over again that if you put in the work in the beginning, you can do such a great job that it allows you to coast later on. So you may have those lengthier conversations with your team members where you're learning more about them in the beginning. But later on, as the relationship continues to build itself out, they know more about you, you know more about them, you guys pick up on each other's patterns, so that cuts down on stuff. And it's less explanation of meanings and intentions of things because y'all have developed this understanding. So not only does it pay to take more time in the beginning to do this legwork, it also benefits you on later on down the line when like a crisis arises or a high need or change in program structure or something like that. You guys have established this connection that allows you to just fall into flow a little bit faster. And so it really, really does pay off for you. But so keep that in mind, not but, and keep that in mind. So now back to the example that I was giving. So I was working with this talented artist, and we were in therapeutic foster care. This was her first job. So I had taken some time, gotten to understand a little bit about her passions. And so last week, I talked about being intentional with the questions that you ask. So I'm not just out here like this is a dating show. Hey, what's your passions? What you like? No, it was okay. So I had known she had shared freely that she had just graduated, and I asked her what her degree was in. She talked about art, and I was like, and so I became really genuinely curious, and I started asking her, okay, tell me more about that. Tell me, and for her, I wanted to understand how she makes her decisions on what pieces she's going to do, right? How she's going to create something. And so I started asking her about what that creativity is like and how she follows up on it and how she stays with it. And so she's telling me about all these things. And I was asking her, what parts of her process is she most excited about? And then and then from there, I transitioned my questions into asking her more of, okay, so now you're in child welfare. Talk to me about that. Like, make it make sense. Help me connect the dots. And so she did. And she shared with me her reason for wanting to go into child welfare while still knowing that her passion was art. And I said, okay, well, now that we know these two different things, where's the parallel? And for a minute, like I mentioned last week, sometimes they may not always see it. And that was true for her. And then, so I started to throw out things that I heard, right? You have to, when someone's speaking up, you have to listen in, hence the title. So I was listening in and I reflected back to her some of the things that I heard and some of the connections that seemed similar. And I asked her what she thought about that. And she agreed and took it further and started adding some more thoughts. So now the next step is, and what we're focusing on for this particular session or episode, I'm so used to being in coaching sessions that y'all will hear me say session a lot, even though this is just like, free discussion in the Leadership Chronicles episode. So time to make this action plan, and I wanted to know more about how she was going to really be able to connect with these young people who had high needs. This was a therapeutic department, and the particular cases that we were receiving, they were a bit high risk for even the department itself, right? And so we started talking about how she's going to engage folks and how she's going to maintain that engagement when situations are tough and people don't want to be bothered, or there is elevated um, moments of crises. Young people are becoming more and more frustrated, and behaviors are starting to become increasingly challenging. And how is she going to prepare herself to handle that? And we talked through it and just started connecting the dots. And I was like, how do you find your own rhythm and flow in connecting with them based on some of the things that you loved? And so she talked about how she would bring in her passion for art and how she can use that in conversations in a multitude of ways. She talked about different activities that she can bring in and things that she wanted to create to help her engage with the young people that she was tasked with working with. And then she talked about different strategies that she would want to put in place for when the behaviors were starting to escalate, and how different mindsets that she had taken from her schoolwork, like having to present this portfolio and put it together in tight time frames, and all the ways that she learned to manage stress during her time in school. She combined that with some of her strategies to help de-escalate rising behavioral concerns within the young people that we were working with. And all of these things she was able to identify for herself. All I had to do as her supervisor was just ask the guided questions. And then I took it a step further, because it's one thing to say this, it's another thing to talk about how realistic is this. And so we did two things. After she came up with different strategies, we went over the strategies to see if they were really connected, right? To make sure that they were feasible. We talked about the amount of time. We talked about the things that she would need to have with her, if anything. And then she kind of scaled things down. She made modifications to some of her suggestions so that it was something that she can keep up with on a regular basis. So when you are in a space where you are creating goals and action plans for your team members, you want to make sure that you are reality testing this, because a thing can sound great, but if it never was rooted in reality, then it was doomed to fail. And while I know we haven't gone into this, but if I didn't share with you guys last time, let me say this. Whenever I'm speaking and whenever I'm making, suggestions, in the back of my mind, the former union hat that I used to wear, I was a union delegate. I held a couple of different positions within the union space, I guess. And so I'm very much aware of what that can be like if there are challenges, performance challenges that arise with team members, and now you have the union breathing down your back because there were some actions that you as a supervisor did not adhere to, or there were some things that you did that has brought the union to your door. So the suggestions that I'm making are with that in mind. And it is things that are designed to help reduce the likelihood of this happening and protect you in the event that it does. And so I know this is going off a little bit on it from where we wanted to stay, but I think that you guys would find this useful, right? Because whether it's the union or HR or some other kind of department who is there to support staff from any kind of improper practices, we want to make sure that we are setting ourselves up as leaders to do our best to avoid those things. And so when I'm saying this, enlisting the support of your team member in their plan, as opposed to dictating and telling them what they're going to do without checking to see if they even have the skill set or the capacity to do so, or the comfort level built up within them to try the thing that you're asking them to do. Those are areas where you start to set them up, because then the first thing the union can do is, okay, you told them to do this. What provisions did you set in place? How did you support them in going to training? How did you look out for them? Oh, or HR can say, okay, so you're trying to get them on improper practices in this way, but let's talk about all the things that you missed here. When you bring your team members into the fold, when you start enlisting their support in in the trajectory of their own professional development, you offset that, because now it's, I sat down, I spoke with this person. Here's what we came up with collectively. This was driven by them. I stuck back and I just asked questions to ensure that it was going to fall in line with the task as they have it assigned to them and as they understand it. And I cross-reference that understanding with the task at hand, right? Because staff can understand the expectations to be one thing, but if it's written in a different way from what they understand, always cross-reference it. Always bring it back to what the task is at hand, right? It may not always be outlined in a job description, but whatever the position is that they're fulfilling, and whatever the work is that they're doing, make sure that before you set them off to go on their own and to carry out their plan, that it is responsive to the needs of the role that they're filling. And so have that conversation with them. And so that goes into the developing of plans that energize staff to meet organizational goals. You have just spoken with your team members about how they plan to use their passions and their hobbies to help them meet the demands of the role. Great job. Now they have an actionable plan that they are excited about, that they helped create, and that you checked and you reality tested to make sure it actually would meet the needs of the role that they're fulfilling. The next thing that we go into for the second part of our discussion tonight is developing skills that increase their satisfaction, their job satisfaction. So there are going to be areas where you'll find your team members need some extra support. And so the question then becomes, how do you find out what that is? How do you get them to self-identify? It's easy for us to say, hey, you need help in this area, in this area, in this area. And sometimes, you know what? I take that back. Let me not even say it's easy for us to say that, because telling somebody where we think they need help and where we feel they need to grow can be met with opposition, whether can be met with actual opposition, or we can assume that it'll be met with opposition. And so we dance around how we want to present it as leaders. And then what happens is that the message is not fully clear because we were uncertain if this was going to be taken the right way, what repercussions it would have for us by telling them, hey, you need to develop in these areas. So here is my recommendation. Develop the skills along the way, not just when there is a challenge coming up. If you have done the work of understanding your team members and you've already come to a place where you've developed this goal, as you're watching them carry it out, see what other areas of growth, see what growth opportunities there might be within them trying to carry out the goal they created. Because if you then say, hey, you know what? I know that you wanted to do these activities with this group of young people, but here's what's happening. The activity that you are trying to do is the young people that you're working with, right, just using that as an example, they're not at the cognitive level to be able to engage in that activity. So how about this? I want you to, one of the things that I do first is I tell them to go find trainings and bring it back to me. Okay. And I tell them, I give them kind of like an outline. Go find a training that you think will address this, like whether it's something specific. In this case, I may say children with learning disabilities. Find a training that would help support this, and then let me know. Let's look through it. Here is the criteria for the training. Like I'll let them know if we have a known dollar amount where it's like, here's your cap, or if there is a time frame to which they need to have the training done, I'll say that, but then I'll leave it in their hands. You go find it because I want them invested in their professional development. You are going to notice it's the coach in me, sure, but I'm talking to you about things that I did long before I became a coach. And that was I wanted I wanted to get the support and buy-in from my team members early on. And I can't stress to you guys enough how much time it saved me on the back end because it just became rhythmic. The team members just knew to expect this from me. And, I've learned, I tell people this a lot. And I probably said this last episode, the team members that I had maybe about 10 years ago, they experienced a very different version of me. I was didn't have as much tact with how I reference things. I was always mindful to be by the book, so to speak, because like I said, I was a union rep and I was part of the union a long, long time ago. And so I learned very early on about adhering to, monitoring, and being mindful of employees' rights and such. And that may be something, I think that probably will be, if y'all are interested, y'all got to let me know in the chat, but talking through how to prepare your leader, how to be inclusive of staff's rights and union things and HR things within your day-to-day work. I'll probably talk about that. It'll be easier for me to answer some questions for you guys. So if there are questions that come up in relation to that topic, then let me know that you're interested and drop some questions that you may want to ask under that discussion. Okay. But back to what I was saying, in terms of developing the skills that increase their satisfaction, getting them to look for their own trainings before there was a high need for it is a helpful way to keep them heavily involved in their own professional development. It is also a way for you to deepen your understanding based on the things that they bring you of where their interest lies. There's also, right, because I'm not oblivious to the fact that there has been times, I'll share from my own experience, there's been times where I'm like, okay, find a training, here's your dollar cap, bring it back to me, you got a week. And then I get some training that is not directly connected to the work and I just can't see it. Well, then that means that it's on me as a leader to read through what they're sending me and then to ask questions, right? So this is the next part I wanted to talk to you all about. When you ask them to go and find trainings and they bring it back, dive into what interested them in selecting this training and what they hope to gain and how they plan to implement this into their daily professional practices. That started off as questions that I would ask team members. And then it became, because I got tired of asking, it was a part of the template that I would send folks. It's like, hey, go find your training, fill this out. It was like three questions for them to answer and then the training details. So it was a little short form for them to fill out, and then I would read through it because it saved me time later on. And so I learned more about their interests, how they saw things, and then we would be able to talk. And if there was a training where it was like, honey, you tried it. This one here is just something fun that you want to go to, and it does not necessarily connect to the work. even after we're talking, you still can't tell me. So here's what we're going to do. Let's work together to find something. And that may be the next step that I take. Now, instead of just leaving them to do it by themselves, I'm going to add a little bit more support in, but starting from the place where we left off. So wherever they lead you to, build from there. Don't start from scratch. What do I mean by that? Whatever training they brought you, if you need to make an alternate suggestion, start from the things that they said they liked about this one. And so it's like, oh, okay, so you like the hours for this. So you want to try to find something that is within the morning hours, and you want something in person. All right, so where else might you look that you think would have trainings that apply to this particular area of growth? I might do a Google search with them. I might make some suggestions. I might point them in different directions of who to ask and then tell them to come back to me with some stuff. Those are ways to now, instead of, and again, I'm not doing the work for you. I am putting the power in your hands, but I'm giving you more guidance because I've already seen where there is an area of needed clarification or misunderstanding or increased level of support needed, and I am inserting that level of support there. I'm giving that extra guidance in that particular area. I'm not doing a takeover, because if you tell somebody, hey, you try this once, they try it once, and then you take it over if they don't get it right, that's going to become a known pattern that they pick up on as well. And that means that you're going to be tasked with constantly having to find things and do things for other people, as opposed to empowering them or developing them, excuse me. I try to be mindful of the fact that, we can't really empower people because it's not our power to give or take. It is helping them to realize the power that rests within them and letting them just go ahead and fly on their own. So we as leaders, we're really creating spaces for them to do that. And it saves us time and energy later on when we are able to create more autonomous staff under our in our teams, rather, in our team members. So give them a little bit more info and say, hey, bring me something back. If usually around the third time for me, if it's still a struggle, then I'm like, all right, here is a recommendation. This is what I want you to try, but then this is where I want you to go, rather. But then I'm going to explain what I'm hoping they'll get from it. I'm likely going to talk with them a minute to see, based on what you're saying, what do you think you can get from this? And how do you think it's going to directly impact the thing that you are working on building up, the skill that you're working on building up or improving or whatever, right? I don't want to just send my team members to trainings just for the heck of it. And then afterwards, the thing to do is, so just the same way that if they were selecting a training, they would have to talk to me about how they foresee themselves putting this into practice afterwards. Even if I give you the training, how do you foresee yourself putting this into practice? Okay, great. Now that you're back, do you have what you need to go ahead and try this out? Because the truth is that everything is trial and error. We do something, if it works, great, we keep at it. If it doesn't work, we modify or we go in a different direction, whatever the situation calls for, but it's all attempts. And so I'm not looking for perfection, but I am looking for you to hold to your word and do the thing that you said, and that is apply it in the way that you thought best. And if you need to come back and change it, and you're like, I thought I was going to learn this, this, and that, and be able to use it in X, Y, and Z way, but that's not what the training was about, then, okay, so what did you learn and what can you implement? Modify the plan, but always make sure that you have one in place, because it sets the tone for them knowing that trainings are important. that you do care about their growth and development. It sends this repeated message that you are going to follow up, that you are there to support them, and that you do want to see them shine. What will happen is that someone who is on your team and experiencing this, as they prepare for their next role as in leadership, if that's where they decide to go with their career, these are foundational things that you are imparting on them that they can continue to pass on. So I'm all for this. Yes. So that's what I have for you guys in regards to developing skills that increase satisfaction. One other benefit that I didn't say in terms of following the suggestion that I had is that it helps your team members feel seen and heard. And that was something that I talked about in the first session. So if you think through all the things that we talked about between the first session and now, it is getting in there and expressing curiosity by asking questions about their passions and their interest. Then connecting those things, asking them how it connects to the work, because you're letting them know, hey, I don't just see you as a body in a seat. I don't just see you as a task rabbit or what have you. I'm interested in a little bit more. And I'm interested in seeing how you envision making this role your own. I don't want you to make it what I tell you to make it. I want you to make it your own. And I'm interested in seeing this happen. I'm going to work with you to get there. Then you take it a step further and you're like, okay, now that we've had this discussion, to further emphasize how serious and committed to it I am, I want to work with you to create a plan around this. What are we going to do? What would a plan look like? And then to continue help building up that team member, let's talk about some added supports, whether that's training or webinars, seminars, discussions, something. Let's talk about what those things look like. And I want to put this in your hands first. It's saying that you trust the person. It's saying that you recognize them as an individual, free-thinking, autonomous being who just happens to be on your team. They are not your property. They are your team members to build up and cultivate. And this is what you are doing when you follow this approach. You will also, added benefit, like I mentioned, you are covering your own self because you have really gotten in there and gotten the support and feedback and thoughts of your team members. You're not just dictating and telling them all these different things. You are enlisting their support. So if something comes up where they're like, I didn't know and I didn't, well, let's talk about that. Because when I sat down with you and I asked you these things, help me understand where the confusion came in. Tell me more about what your understanding was when you mentioned this after I asked this, your response was X. This happened, blah, blah, blah. Those things go a long way in the event that you need to cover your own behind because of some kind of union matter or HR matter. Cover all your bases. But the biggest thing that I love about all this is that it creates a more autonomous workforce, and it saves you time and energy later on down the line when you have a team of individuals who can think for themselves and who know that they are trusted enough and who know what to bring you back to help you make sound decisions on what to approve and what not to approve, because they've already demonstrated for you that they've thought through this, because they've picked up on your pattern of the things that you're going to ask. So that goes into more of what I mean by how it saves them time. You do the work of investigating, going deeper, learning more about them in the beginning, and they take care of the rest for you as work goes on. Okay. So now this brings us into our Q&A. And so the polling question that is now closed was around aspects of communication that we find most challenging as leaders. And the three areas that, or the three selections was team creativity, pursuit of excellence, and job satisfaction. So my hope is that between this episode and the last episode that I've spoken more detailed to all three of these areas. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of go in and speak a little bit more on each of these three as it relates to some challenges and why this might be challenging and how we can overcome them, okay? So the first one is team creativity. In terms of aspects of communication that we find most challenging. It can be difficult as a leader to try to tap into the creativity of your team members. It can, depending on how many people you're working with, that's a host of different ways and approaches that you may end up needing to take. And so I'll share with you, of course, we know this is leaders building leaders. And so if someone has other thoughts on how they made this work, please drop that in the chat for all of us. But I'll say in regards to team creativity, I like to share the responsibility of the work with my team members. And what I mean by that is, let's say, so usually I'll have like a team meeting. And if I have like my bi-weekly team meeting, I would pass the responsibility off to a different team member each time we meet. You are going to host it. Here is basically the template, like the outline of how this is going to flow. But you do this, you lead this, you run this, you bring in an icebreaker, show me what you got, let's have fun with it. You direct some of the conversations, you lead with certain things, you pull me in. Here, I'll give them like parameters. Here's what I'm going to speak to, or here's where I'll jump in, but let me see what you got. And let them do it. Let them do it. Let them share their visions. The other thing that I love doing is getting an understanding of why. And why has become such a scary question to ask and is starting to get a bad rep. Because like, don't ask why, because it feels like you're saying somebody did something wrong, or it just has like this bad connotation. I'm not really of that frame of mind. I feel like why tone matters, right? And I feel like why is an inquisitive question. Now, if you were not comfortable with asking why, don't do it. But for me, it's more of an inquisitive thing. And I often find myself curious to understand the why of things, right? It's one thing to see and know what you did, but more important than what you did for me is why. And the reason for that, especially when it comes down to building up teams and bringing out the best of the best of what they have to give and seeing their creativity flourish, understanding the why behind it can really help you step back and allow greater room, because it's within the why that you start to learn what they were thinking, what they were going for, their aim and such. And so if there's little tweaks and mods that need to be made, you're making it from a deeper place of understanding where they were coming from and not just your interpretation of what they were trying to do. And so one of the ways that I try to work on, communicating different things with my team to pull out their creativity is by getting to the heart of it. Talk to me about why. Help me understand why. And giving them opportunities to step up and do certain things and be creative. So the second one is pursuit of excellence. So an aspect of communication that can be difficult, some voted that pursuit of excellence. And when I say some, we had an even number of votes for all three categories. So that's why I'm talking about all three tonight. Pursuit of excellence as a challenge. This goes into the plan. The plan. I just spoke about creating a plan. I'm going to take this a step further by saying SMART goal that plan. Okay. Now, this is something that can take a little bit more time, but honey, especially when it comes down to big projects, SMART goals are the thing. Like, this is my go-to because it covers a multitude of bases. So I'm going to share with you just a quick rundown of like my SMART goal shortcut, so to speak, right? Okay, so in case anybody's wondering what a SMART goal is, it's an acronym and it stands for SMART is the acronym, and it's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. The R can be interchanged with realistic or relevant, and the A can be substituted for attainable or achievable. Semantics, fine. Here's my shortcut. When I'm doing the SMART goal, it is, what is the thing that you're trying to do? Grade. How do you know that that thing that you're trying to do is actually going to offset or get you to the destination that you want to go? If it's mitigating a challenge, how do you know that this thing is going to offset that challenge? If it's elevating practice, how do you know that this thing is going to elevate your practice? What is your measurable target? Where are you going with this? What do you want to see at the end of it? Great. And what are the steps you're going to do to get you to that target, to that measured outcome that you have? If it's to reduce something, what are the steps you're going to take to get there? Okay. Those are the things. You start breaking that down. Here's why I love working the SMART goal in this way, because from there I get to go a little bit deeper with them because they start to see some of the foundations happening. And now I start talking through, this is the coach in me. Let's reality test it. Can you really start? And oh, sorry, biggest one. When are you starting and when are you going to have your cutoff to assess? Sometimes things just have a concrete end date. For things that don't have an end date, and this is some stuff, oh man, this was so exciting. I did some leadership development work with junior high school social workers, bomb group. Shout out to y'all if any of y'all are watching this. But I did some work for almost a whole semester with some social workers from a junior high school. And when we got to the SMART goal piece, it seems so simple until you start thinking through the time piece. People will say, oh, well, I'm going to start here and I'm going to end here. Okay. Don't get so fixed. These are just placeholders. Your start date and your end date are placeholders. On larger projects, you might want to have intervals and that means you might want to have a time somewhere in between where you assess your progress. You assess how well you're doing to see if this is the direction you should continue going on, right? And so I bring that up as an example because I'm remembering a couple of the social workers was saying, well, it's not like I have a deadline for this. I want to just keep this going forever. Like, this is what I want to adopt into practice. And for them, I would say, put a marker. Give yourself an end date. Say over the next 60 or 90 days, 30 days, whatever, I'm going to monitor this. Here is what I want to do. Here is what it's going to look like when I know I've been successful. And here are the things that I'm going to do to help me get to that successful point. At the end of the 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, I'm going to check in to see how that really is going. Great. And if it's working for you, then you continue on well past the 60 or 90 days. If it's not working for you, you make tweaks. But the best thing about it is that you have put in a plan that is striving towards excellence. You are moving in the direction of excellence. So when it comes down to communicating the pursuit of excellence, it is SMART goals all the way for me, all the way for me, because it's not just what I consider to be excellence, but when you create a SMART goal, your team member is really driving that. And you're just there kind of like, okay, well, remember there's a stop sign at the end of that road, so you can't really go there, or that's a one-way street. So I know you're really excited about driving on straight, but then that converts into a one-way in the opposite direction. So talk to me about how you're still going to get to your destination by taking another route. I'm using a driving analogy because that's kind of how I see my role in terms of being a leader building other leaders. I'm not telling you what to do. I need to see you. I need you to be in this. And so when we're talking about excellence, it's not my excellence, it's your excellence. And my job is to help you learn to navigate those roads by getting you there and not letting you set out on a journey that I know you can't do because of the nature of the work. So I'm not going to let a social worker tell me that they are going to start living in the family's home in order to see some behavioral changes between the parent and child. You can't do that. Instead, what I'm going to say is, okay, well, we know that moving into the family's home is not an option, and I know you still want to get there. So what other means can you take to reach that goal? Example, kind of extreme, sure, maybe, but y'all get the gist. Last one, because we are doing good on time, but we're also running close to the clock. Last one is job satisfaction. Y'all already heard me talk about it. Getting them to buy into the work by bringing more of who they are into this space. Another thing that I didn't reference is asking them straight up, what would help you feel more satisfied here? And whatever answer they give you, why? Follow it with a deeper understanding of why they said it is. If it's money, what about money would make you feel more satisfied here? Go deeper. If it's a raise, what about it? If it's money, raise, kind of same thing. Different position, different this, go deeper, because you want to understand the things that get them excited about it. And sometimes people will say money, but the reality is when you start asking the why and you're understanding what they're trying to get at, there are other things that you can offer that don't have a dollar amount attached to it. It supersedes dollar amount because of the value that it brings to them. So ask them directly and find out their why. And on that note, folks, as this second episode comes to a close of the Leadership Chronicles, I just want to let you all know that May 25th, it's a Saturday at noon, I am hosting my Restorative Conversations workshop. Folks, let me explain this. My explanation probably isn't going to do it justice, but I'm going to do my best. I'll tell you what this was inspired by. This was inspired by working in spaces where the struggle to address moments of offense, moments of offenses, moments of unconscious bias was not present. And it wasn't that it wasn't present because people are just horrible people, but I started to realize that you can't even be accountable for what you are saying or doing because you are scared that this is going to give you all kind of backlash. You are scared that if you acknowledge that what you said had a negative connotation to it or that it had a potentially negative impact on the staff that heard it, that then you would be brought up on some kind of charges or someone will report you or this or that, and then your apology would be sheer admittance of it. That's where this was birthed from. And I wish I had more time because I would share my own personal experiences in dealing with this. But here's what I'll say. This workshop is designed to help leaders learn to communicate when something was done that could potentially cause harm or have an unintended outcome. That's one side of it. And the other side is for those who feel that they've been wronged, and for those who feel that, there's a moment where I just want someone to acknowledge and apologize so we can move forward and rebuild. The other part is for helping folks to learn how to come forth in bravery and say, hey, this is something we got to talk through. This was not okay. This workshop, remember I said I got that union hat on. If and as the episodes continue to go, I'm going to share more with you guys about the depths of my union experience and the things that it has protected me from. Know that this is what I'm building into the work that I do. And this workshop is designed to help people address challenges before it goes into larger situations that we often don't like to deal with, because it does an impact on workplace culture. It has an impact directly on the leader who is involved, on the team member who is involved, and it ripples out across workspaces. So this workshop is important. It is on a Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. The registration is now open. To secure your seat, it is you pay the registration fee. It is $247 to make sure that you secure your seat. Get in there. This is an interactive workshop. We are going to take you through foundational learning moments. I'm going to walk you through coaching, how to coach yourself through these moments. The skills that you take are not just going to be for you. These are things that are transferable. What you learn, you put into practice, and then you pass it on. This is a workshop that I tell people you can't afford to miss. You may think that you don't need it. Trust me, not only do you need it, but your workplace needs you to have this so that you can be the catalyst for change within your workspace. So you can take this back and create stronger cultures of accountable leaders, of accountable team members. So May 25th at noon, registration is now open. If you want the registration link, drop your emails wherever you are seeing this, or go to thekeynsg.com. Sign up for my mailing list. You will be sent the link to register. In the meantime, folks, see you back here in 2 weeks. This will be posted on YouTube in a week. So next Tuesday, I'll post it on YouTube. And in the meantime, never stop growing. Have a wonderful night, y'all. Bye.